don't think we want it.
All right, thank you all. We've got a fairly short agenda here. We'll try to get through it as quickly as we can. We'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Eastward Alderman John Flynn.
Here.
Eastward Alderman J.C. Cunningham.
Here.
Mayor Natalie McNish.
Here.
Westward Alderman Robert Boggs.
Here.
Westward Alderman Stacy Lee.
Here. If you would please stand for a moment of silent prayer or reflection, followed by the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In your packet is a copy of the minutes from the November 22nd meeting. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? If not, I'll take a motion and second.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up in your packet is an expenditure. You do have a supplemental claim report on the table. Specific items that Monica wanted to call out are on the memorandum. Is there anything else of significance? Okay. Are there any questions for Monica on this information?
So I'll explain the additional claims report. The police department has received a grant for the Shop with a Cop grant from Walmart. We apply for that every year. And we get a check made out to the city of Marshfield, and then we turn around and make the check out to Walmart. And then they're going shopping on the 11th. So it would be before our next meeting. So that's what that's for. And then the other one was a refund for overpayment for the sewer and water. She wanted to get that up.
Thank you, Monica. If no questions or comments, I'm looking for a motion and second.
Make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We've included reports on here to capture the COVID report. This was the most recent one that I had received from the health unit. Are there any questions on this topic today? All right. Then we will continue on to mayor appointments. I do have one appointment I'd like to make today. Dina Weaver was nominated by the cemetery board to serve on the cemetery board, and she was already confirmed by Doug Davis as being interested in filling that role. So I would like to appoint Dina Weaver to the cemetery board.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll move into unfinished business, which is our Grow Marshfield contract. It's included in your packet today. It's the same language as what you saw last week, except last week, except for the changes that we requested Paul to make. He's added those. There is one portion in here. Steve, what section is that
It's
in?
under scope,
Okay.
very beginning, it's the last sentence.
It refers to an exhibit A.
What?
On the second page of the contract, under number 1. It refers to an exhibit A. We've looked back through emails and tried to reach out to Dwayne. We don't have exhibit A. So I would ask you tonight to approve it contingent upon us receiving exhibit A. I won't sign the contract until we have exhibit A. And then, of course, we'll bring that back to you.
I'll make that motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Right. Hold it. That requires resolution.
Yes.
I gotta read that.
Fast. Too.
Yeah, sorry.
Going out at 7:30. We're at a good.
You know, good, a little quicker pace than necessary. Resolution 2021-06, a resolution approving the terms of an economic development services agreement between the city of Marshfield and Grow Marshfield.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Content, yeah, thank you. Contingent upon receipt of exhibit A. and roll call on a resolution? I've suddenly forgotten.
I don't believe.
No, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Trying to get through so fast, I'm like missing my cues here. Okay, the next items on your agenda here are actually going to be tabled. So the Centos renewal agreement in here is going to be tabled. Staff are working through some technicalities with that particular agreement. And the authorization to purchase a saw for the water department is also being tabled. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that will take us all the way down to the 2022 operational budget. I'm gonna hand it over to Sam and Monica, who know more about this stuff.
So what you have in front of you tonight is the budget in its entirety. We've been through each individual fund and each individual department and budget. You have seen all of these. You guys have given input on this. The finance committee has also given input on this. Wanted to put this back in front of you as it is in its entirety. I anticipate that we'll probably look at high level tonight, meaning cash balances, and look at the surplus or deficit amounts. But I will tell you that I was hopeful to have a letter ready for you guys from the finance committee, but I don't have that ready yet. And so it will be here by the 15th. But they are, when we talk about, this is the operational budget, what you see in front of you. We have the growth areas that we went through at the last meeting. We went through that this week with the finance committee. Their recommendation, I can tell you verbally, is that it is to appropriate all the funds for all the growth areas, but not to approve any of those funds for the water and the sewer department until the deficit is taken care of. So with that, it's going to be very similar to last year, where all of the funds were appropriated for those, but they come back to this board and they go through the procurement process, which requires us to come back to this board anyway for 95% of those expenditures anyway. But their recommendation was based off of what my recommendation is as well, is that we wouldn't spend those big dollars out of the water and sewer fund until that deficit was taken care of. So with that, if you do you want to go fund by fund to recap? That's what tonight is for, is just to recap whatever you guys feel like you need a recap on.
I'd definitely like to know what items changed since the last time they were presented.
So the last time, and so Monica will have to keep me straight on this, but the last time that we talked, the last time we got together and we went over some of these budgets, we were still using a 10% increase on the insurance. We actually got that back and it was just a little over 1%, and it did vary a little bit between different departments. But that has been updated and changed. We did take, did we take the police cars and take them, what did we do there?
Yes, the police vehicles have been moved over to the growth areas, both the purchase vehicle and then the lease vehicle. We did leave the remaining lease payments for the 2017 vehicles to be paid out of cash out of this year. And so even though these vehicles have been moved over to the growth areas.
So we had based that decision early on internally, just based off of hoping to get those vehicles approved and just to knock those two leases off and then just pick two new leases up in January. But last that I knew, even if we ordered them now, be July at the earliest before we got them. And so we don't have to pay those off. I don't know that it's a bad thing. We go ahead and pay them off. I think we've done okay this year, and I think that we're sitting in a cash position for this year that it would probably be appropriate just to go ahead and pay those off. We don't owe that much money on them, and then just start the next year fresh, and then we pick those lease payments back up in July or August whenever we get there. Total for at the end of the so at the end of the year for the three vehicles total will owe $6,000, and so it may, in my opinion, we probably might as well just clean that up and pay those off and be done with those. What else?
is the new allocation for grow? And how have we compensated for it in the various funds?
In it has been reduced in the budget from the 100,000 originally presented to 80,000, with it evenly split still among the same 5 funds: the cemetery fund, the water and the sewer CIP, parks and the general, and then all the other funds were able to carry that in. Well, the operational, it's a CIP, that's a CIP fund. It's not an operational account, but the general fund, we would carry over $3,137 out of cash instead of it being in the operational part of the budget.
How much is that? Say that again. How much is that of cash?
3,100.
Okay,
$3,137 out of cash, just in the general fund. But the other funds have their full allocated balance.
And if you were sitting side by side with your other sheet to this sheet, we have had through open enrollment and through this and that, we have had some just changes for health insurance, family plans versus what, so there has been some altercations to that, and that's accounted for in here as well.
And I've also included the insurance on the new vehicle that we just purchased today, as well as the proposed or the water truck that was approved earlier in the year that we haven't purchased yet, as well as the insurance on the new vehicles. I could have put that in the growth areas, but I just went ahead and put that in the insurance line, so that there is a budgeted amount for that.
And so the board had approved the $70,000 for 2 trucks. We purchased one for 30, just shy of 33,000. I cannot find enough. It was just a fluke deal that I found that one. I cannot find another one. I've got dealerships looking for them. Our guys are looking for them. I'm still looking for them. Just cannot find what we're looking for without having to step away from what we're really looking for and what we need. The truck that we're looking for now is going to a trailer the majority of its life, and so we're really looking for a diesel, and we're looking for a dually, and we found everything, but even what we're finding in gas engines, I mean, they're jumping up to 45 to 48,000. I priced just for kicks and giggles. I talked to the dealerships this week and I priced out a brand new one, plain Jane. What can I get a brand new one for? And it's at 49 to 51. Why in the world would we go ahead and pay $48,000 for a truck with 100,000 miles on it? So at this point, I think it's probably, unless something just pops up between now and the end of the year that is just a great deal, we have those funds that like to carry over to next year, but then we've got other trucks in there for next year. I think we're just gonna kind of play it by ear and see what we can come up with. The market is just terrible.
is the carryover amount listed in the growth areas?
It's not, because up until when I picked that truck up this week and signed the papers yesterday or day before, I still had really heavy hopes that we would get it bought in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I lost faith after I left the dealership.
So I do believe we need it back in the document for approval in order to reappropriate those funds.
Okay.
Because that appropriation would end at the end of the year, so we would need to reappropriate.
And so we've signed the contract and everything on the mini excavator. They told us we would have it the last week of November, and then it was the first week of December. Now they're saying the week before Christmas, and so we might, it's gonna be a last minute, but we might want to play that safe and roll that over as well, knowing that it may come off of this year. If it goes beyond December,
We can work on that.
we can do that.
That's probably a little bit different because we've already bought it. It's just in transit.
Sure.
That's a timing issue versus
Sure.
we haven't really even bought something.
It's not for a lack of trying.
Right. So overall, can you run through what is the financial health of each one of the funds for us?
For the current year and for the 2022 budget? Or just 22?
Probably just 22.
Okay. So on the general administrative, the only thing that would be coming out of cash without the growth areas is the small portion of the grow Marshfield. However, I do feel like our revenue projections are very conservative, and I do feel like that $3,000 could be absorbed with those revenues. So overall, I think our general and administrative, while not necessarily growing, it's not decreasing either. So I think that's
Just
a
stable.
good thing. You want that to include all the general fund?
Just that department by department or just?
Okay.
I don't, I just wanted it by fund. Alderman, do you have a different preference? Okay.
All the police, building, and animal reports are all going under that general. And the next one really comes to,
We'll mention while she's coming to the next one, on the industrial park fund, we did take some things to the finance committee, and there was great discussion about the incentives policy. And so went back and forth whether, how to take care of that. I will tell you that just as recently as this week, I got a hold of another incentives policy from another local community, and it is very well written, it's very well done. It's easy to understand. It pulls a lot of stuff out of Springfield. And so we do have a presentation on the next meeting from another company that Paul had recommended us to reach out to. And I've been in conversation with him, great conversation with him as well. I think it's still very appropriate for us to have him come and do his presentation, but probably going to hit the pause button just a little bit to look at this policy that we got this week. But it's a very good policy. And so I think we need to kind of look at what we're trying to accomplish with that policy and kind of weight that against what I got this week. So it's still budgeting to spend those dollars. So I think that we need to, until the point we don't need to, if that makes sense. So after this year, if we go that route and we go with a company to come in and do that, this fund will basically be no more.
And regardless of whether or not we had to pay for a policy to be drafted, we would still want to interview both parties because we want an advisor on the implementation of the policy when a developer would come forward and say, I want to do this. What does the city want to do? So I think it's good that we're still going through all of these practices. It could be that we're not going to spend that on what we thought we'd spend it on, but we still need that ally and that knowledge base. And so I think we need to pick an advisor that we're comfortable with.
So for lack of better terms, we'll have them on retainer without paying a retainer fee. So we will, by that point, we will have went through the process of selecting someone, staff and you all. And so then we will have documentation of how and why we select them. And then if we have a project come to the table, we don't have to go through a 2-month process to say, well, let's pick a financial advisor and now we can move. At least then we will have the documentation that says, this is how we can, if they come back and they say the projected cost to make this CID or this TIF work is going to be $50,000. Well, we have in our own policy, we can't just hand select somebody. We have to go through a selection process, and that's what we're doing.
Yep.
I just thought that was really cool.
our cemetery fund. It is budgeted in the positive, even with the full allocation of the reduced amount for Grove Marshfield. Growth areas for the cemetery are basically from allocation from City Hall and City Hall expenditures. So overall, this fund is doing fairly well this year, and in part because of the increased fees for the trade opening and not. there is still some money there for future expansion and future projects.
That's great.
And keep in mind, one reason why it is so much to the that it is to the positive is because those growth areas, we had the niche structure, we had this and that we are now doing in-house versus going out for professional services for that.
And on the Parks Fund, the Parks Fund is budgeted at a surplus, even with the full Go Marshfield, and with the reduction of the general fund dollars being brought into the Parks Fund. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on that. Okay. Transportation Fund. We are budgeting a deficit on this one, but it is because we're budgeting for some projects to be completed, and specifically the North Marshall. And then some replace existing patches and some sidewalk replacement. So as we get closer to that big process, we'll know where those dollars, if that budget amount is close to what the project amount would be.
So while we say it's a deficit, what we're saying is we're using cash that we've accumulated for the purpose of doing these projects. So when it gets into some of these restricted funds, the deficit doesn't really mean deficit. It doesn't mean we don't have enough money to operate, because this particular fund is for the purpose of fixing our infrastructure. And so we have to accumulate a cash balance and then spend it on big projects.
I do want to take note on the on the 2021 estimated actual. We still are budgeting or still have in place a contingency for the I-44 roundabout. We are not going to know that amount now, so that actually needs to be also put back into 2022 budget, I feel.
Okay,
Because we don't have any idea when that closing will
it's
be.
going to be,
And so it's not going to be this year.
okay.
In fact, they have indicated that probably won't be until July.
They'll be into their year. Okay.
But but just a reminder that there are funds in there for other maintenance, Prairie Lane, Marshall Street, some rubber crack filling material. So there are items in there that we will be able to be proactive for, or that we can use to contract out to be proactive for on some of the crack filling stuff.
The transportation capital project fund. We have budgeted, we've not budgeted anything for this. We really probably need to carry over, we just spent almost $800,000 tonight for Banning and for Elm Street. But we still have some dollars in there. We have the trail that's going to carry over.
We did really
So
well.
we need to update this one for the
Yes.
final. Okay.
Yeah, we just got the bill. We just got the bill on that. So we did very well on the tonnage and on the usage for the asphalt for Elm Street and for Banning. Came in under what we had estimated and projected.
Right.
And so that's a good thing. As a reminder, these funds are the ones that our financial advisor said spend. There's no reason not to. If you don't spend them, they go back to principal. You can't use them for anything else. So put them towards a paving project, a transportation project, something. So that's why they're coming back. Their next deadline is May to put the trail in.
Mhm.
After that is done, I anticipate probably the rest of those funds to be used. However, if they're not, we need to, those will be the first things off the list, transportation wise. When we start spending money on transportation, we need to spend those first, whether it be doing something with the trails and sealing, or whether it be the next paving project. We need to get, those monies need to be spent in 22.
How much less did those come back at? I can't tell on here.
On the, well, keep in mind, this is a portion of it, but are you talking about
The Banning
the-
and Elm Street.
I'd have to go pull them. I'd have, You have it.
Well, I don't know.
On the
I'm not-
project list.
Yes, I have.
I guess.
So I mean, we have a balance of the contract of $495,925.
And all they lack is putting in that trail down North Elm, right?
Yeah, and I don't remember what the price was on the trail. That's why I said I don't want to shoot from the hip tonight, but I mean, I can bring
Yeah,
that to you
yeah.
if you want to.
No, I was just talking out loud, kind
Yeah.
of thinking, so,
I don't think
That's-
that,
that's-
I don't know that we did really well,
right. But
but we weren't over.
it's always good when you're under.
Yes,
Right.
It's always better.
yes. I've been here for a long time, and every time we go to pay, you figure it, and you try to put a contingency in there to kind of cover that. And you just don't know, because when you start into it, yeah, I mean, if you need an inch here, you spend the money and you put an inch here,
Right.
and that inch, if it's 300 feet long, that could be the difference of $10,000. And do you do it right, or do you save the money? I mean, you've
Yeah.
got to do it right, so.
So when the transportation capital fund comes back to us, it will come back to expend everything we have left in it. Yes, thank you.
And then our debt service, the GO bond debt service fund, that's our property tax levy specifically for our 2018 GO bonds, the transportation bond. And this is just fine. We're looking to with the transfer in from the transportation fund, and we're looking at growing this fund by $9,000. We could reduce that transfer if needed by the $9,000 just to make it even. But we'll need to make that payment at the beginning of the year, and that's why the $500,000.
Right.
Just to make sure we have everything covered in there.
So for budgeting law, the revenues don't actually matter. It's the expenditure line. So we can't spend more than what the budget says we can spend without amending. But we can make more money than what it says, or we could make less money and we don't have to amend the budget, right? So for the purposes of this exercise, we don't need to change it, even though, like Monica is saying, we could. There is some flexibility in that number. There are some additional plans we'll get to talk about after the first of the year that Sam has with transportation. That maybe some of that flexibility will come into play. But it's one of those wait and see what really comes in and what's available before we made that decision.
Our water revenue bonds, the water revenue bonds is a percentage of our water rates that automatically come over into this fund, this account, and it's specifically for our revenue bond, our water revenue bonds, which for this instance, it's the SRF loan project. And these revenues are not enough for the entire debt service. So you will see that transfer in from the CIP. That is how the budgeting plan or the debt service plan the financial plan has been from the beginning of this, is to use this portion and then to have a portion of the CIP come in to pay for that debt service.
So if the board chose in the future to make a change to rates, it would change the amount of revenue that was coming in to pay this and maybe lessen the expenditure out of CIP? The transfer?
Well, you could do that. What happened last time the rates increased,
Mhm.
the percentage went down.
Oh, so they
You know,
changed the percentage. Okay,
I mean, you could look at it both ways. Because at that time, we did not have there was another revenue
Okay.
bond that was being paid, and that was sufficient.
okay,
So you do definitely have a little bit of flexibility on that.
thank you.
our wastewater treatment plant with the insurance changes and healthcare changes that have happened, and we are still at a deficit. It has been reduced a little bit to $97,620.
I think the first round was at 110. I think it's came down to 97.
So this one is an operating fund. So what this deficit means is that our current revenues that we project to come in won't cover our expenses. And so we will be taking that 97 out of the cash. The cash is expected to be about 700,000, 800,000, somewhere between there at the end of the year. So we definitely have sufficient funds to cover this deficit. But nonetheless, even with the changes, the deficit remains.
And I would also point out too, is if you look at any of the growth areas, with that reduction brings that cash balance down. And you really are not able to go within or to expend anything for growth areas, or very little, because you would be leaving the cash balance. It didn't go so low.
Right.
I've got the wastewater treatment plant capacity fees. Other than the steep grant, nothing's being budgeted out of that currently for this year or for 2022. So it will just be accumulating until the next need. Water and sewer capital project fund, that's our 2020 revenue bonds that have been paying for the treatment plant.
Just a second, can I back up real quick?
Yes.
Do we need to pull that SCEAP in 2022?
I don't know. I'll find out. Yeah, I'll find out for sure. Depends on the billing. Yes, we'll find out for sure.
On the water and sewer capital project fund, it is estimated that we will have $1.3 million at the end of this year. So and then at the end of next year, with the remaining north side expansion budget, and we'll have $767,973 left. And at the moment, there's nothing being budgeted for that amount. So if a project does come up, we'll have to come back to the budget.
Some of this could work into our hopes for working with DED on that expansion. This money was all used for that area's expansion anyway, so it would make sense to partner this with whatever we might be able to get from DED. We'll just have to see how that works out.
Our water department, with the changes that have been made with the insurance and anything else, we're budgeting at a deficit of $3,999. This does include the insurance of a vehicle that hasn't been purchased yet. We have that one included in our budget. And with our current rates.
And this particular fund has a cash balance of right at $1 million, which in that realm isn't near enough, but it will more than cover the $4,000.
Well, and then we also have, on the second page, you'll see our reserve replacement fund. So we budget a total of $122,140 going into this fund. But however, then we actually budget a portion of that to actually be spent on those projects that are included in that fund. So some of those dollars will be expended, and then some will be included into the balance of that reserve replacement So not only do you have $1 million of unallocated cash up top, but you also have 400,000 in that reserve replacement.
So keep in mind, we have identified several large projects and several large pieces of equipment that need to be replaced, which could come out of this or could come out of, yeah, they could come from several different places, but just keep in mind those water towers, we washed them this year, they look great. They look much better. I wouldn't say they look great, they look much better. But between those two towers, I mean, we could easily chew up $500,000.
Yeah.
In
Just trying to
one expenditure. So I know that it sounds like we have quite a bit of money sitting there. We're in a very good position.
Mhm.
However, if we were really aggressive, it's not, as Natalie said, it's not near enough money. And so planning
We're in a
those
great
projects.
spot if we didn't have to do anything.
Right.
If
So
everything
planning-
was just already perfect, we're in a great spot,
But
but we're not.
But those towers need to be washed every 3 to 5 years. And so I don't know that they can be washed again without having to have them painted. If we have to have them painted, they have to be stripped down. And so if you do that, then we're talking about bringing curtains in. We're talking about a very, very, very expensive process.
You can't, you can't go over that and encapsulate it.
I don't think so.
I thought the encapsulation sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I wish, but two, keep in mind, that's just the portion that you see. The inside portion is the same way, and so it needs to be done as well.
Yeah.
And so you're talking, especially on the Pine and Jackson, just a little more information on what you need, but just for budget purposes. Originally in our plan for these improvements, that tower was planned to be decommissioned. Well, because of all the work we put into the growth plan, and because of the projected growth, I don't think that that's the best idea at this time. So it did not get rehabbed in this project. It needs to be rehabbed. That rehabilitation in there, just of the pipes and everything, are going to cost, over $100,000 anyway. And then whenever you start tying into that, you've got everything else that needs to be replaced as far as the paint and the ladders and stuff inside. So we could easily spend $350,000 to $450,000 on that tower alone. And so when you weight that compared to, somebody could say, well, my goodness, that's a lot to spend on that tower. Weighted against 1.4 for a new one, it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Have the water capacity fees, nothing's being budgeted out of that. We're just collecting those fees and putting them aside until a future need for that. And then the last two sheets I have are the CIP. The first one is the combined sheet that you have seen previously. And then the second one is actually taking them out, and separating them out. With ordinance reads.
Right, and so we had previous board had combined these two. And our external auditor, our independent auditor, had made a comment that they weren't supposed to be combined. And we went back and reviewed the ordinance, and the ordinance reads that they're separate as well. And so staff looked at first, we looked at for efficiency or for some form of operations, is there a need for them to be together, right? Trying to figure out the original motivation of consolidating this. All in all, they agreed that it really doesn't make any difference. It's just a couple extra accounting entries for Monica every month. But all in all, it really didn't make a difference if they were in two funds or one. And so it's been staff's recommendation that in our budget, we break them back out, which now agrees with our ordinance, which already exists, and agrees with our independent auditor's opinion on the matter.
So this fund, well, separated out, we have a water CIP and a sewer CIP. The water CIP has, will have approximately $347,762 in it. And then the wastewater will have $1,148,686. Currently, the budgeted amount for debt service, the We have the 2020 B revenue. bonds. So a portion, we got funding for those bonds, and a portion of it's going to the water and a portion of it's going to the sewer. So this shows the estimated debt service for if that balance of $767,000 that's remaining in those proceeds, if that balance is spent on sewer projects, then this is the estimated percentage of what that debt service would be. And then again, we have the Grow Marshfield and then a transfer to the water debt service for the SRF, which leaves a balance of $104,200. That isn't being budgeted to be expended. And then finally is the growth areas that have been presented. Proposed and proposed areas. There's been real significant changes on that one. I think there was a truck on there that was duplicated.
Yeah.
And then, so that had been removed.
And the,
then
and the
added
Patriot
the
Box sign.
was-
That, and the sign was duplicated. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it is, yes.
So as I said, the park board met, finance committee met. They recommended approval of appropriating all the funds for all of the growth areas, with the exception of not spending any of those dollars or approving any of those dollars out of the water and wastewater fund until the debt service.
The finance committee met.
The finance committee made that recommendation.
I think that's a sound recommendation. I mean, that's definitely something we are working towards anyway, so I think that's good. Are there any questions from the board? Anything else you would like to see that you haven't seen before we put this in front of you for possible approval at the next meeting? I know it's a lot of information, even though we've been over it for many, many, many months. It's still a lot of information. So if something comes to your mind, please reach out to Monica and Sam and ask any question you might have. I do want you to be comfortable with this when it goes through. All right. Future agenda items. Okay, hearing none. We'll move to closed session. Pursuant to section 61021 subsection 2 of the revised statute of the state of Missouri pertaining to leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate, and pursuant to section 61021 subsection 3 of the revised statutes of the state of Missouri pertaining to hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting a particular employee. I'm looking for a motion and second to close.
Second.
Okay. And roll call.
Quinn.
Aye.
Boggs.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Cunningham.
All right.